Joyous rising, family. Good morning. Hello, glorious rising, grand rising, great rising. Happy Tuesday. Boy, do we have a lot scheduled for you all today. Good morning. Please check in, family. Let us know where you're hailing from, where you're checking in from. Today, we do have a special guest who will be joining us this morning, the CEO of Miles Franklin, Andy Schectman, and he will be here shortly. But before we got started, I wanted to say good morning, joyous rising, and also tell you all that I am so happy about how many of you have been working on your humanitarian projects with Gold Star Mother Susan Price. So she told me you all have done amazing work putting together your projects, coming up with titles, names, and also ideas and objectives and a mission statement for your project. So Gold Star Mother Susan Price will be back on Thursday at 1 o'clock to talk to us about doing a follow-up. She'll do a follow-up with us and talk to us about more how to refine our project. So I look forward to seeing you all then on Thursday at 1 o'clock. So family, you all have been busy doing your humanitarian projects. Congratulations. I'm excited for you. Also, we're going to have a whole lot coming up next week where we'll have XRP Lion One, hopefully to come back to talk to us more about digital assets. But today we have Andy Schectman, and he's in the back office, so we're going to invite him. Now, I'm so excited about things that have been going on in the mainstream media and behind the scenes. So hold on 1 minute. We're going to bring on Andy. Hi, Andy.
Hello, Kia. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Good
So nice
morning.
to see you.
Good to see you too. Oh my gosh, Andy. So far we have about 60 people that are in the chat, but it's increasing. And they are excited about what's going on behind the scenes. A lot of the things that you've been talking about for years, Andy, years, is finally happening. So, for people who don't know, Andy Schectman is the CEO of Miles Franklin, a precious metals company. He's been in business for 34 years. It started with his dad. So now he's taken over the business. They've approached, is it $8 billion in sales?
Almost 9 now.
Yay! Almost $9 billion in sales. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and never had one customer complaint. We are thrilled and so blessed, so fortunate to have the man of the hour. I mean, everybody's trying to get a hold of Andy right now because he's
It's been outrageous, Kia. It truly has. And it's interesting. And thank you. You're so
you're
kind.
welcome.
You're so sweet. You're so happy. You're so infectious. It's always great to be here. You certainly are a day brightener.
Thank you,
Um,
Andy.
and I appreciate it. So yeah, it's been insane. You're right. I've been talking about this stuff since 2020. Go back to the podcast that I was doing in 2020, and it's dominated virtually every one of the maybe 1,500 podcasts I've done
Hmm.
since 2020. It's been the main topic. I called it at the very beginning a linear progression of events that started
Okay.
in 2017, and we've talked a lot about those events that continue to be following in line
Mm.
a narrative of global de-dollarization. And it's interesting that the mainstream media now thinks they're onto something when quite frankly this has been going on for quite some time. But what is happening is that it's beginning to accelerate, not only in speed, but also in severity, and what it really truly means to the rest of the world. And I think that's the one thing that is being missed by the mainstream media is the ramifications of what happens if these unions that are obviously being made and growing in intensity when the switch is flipped. And that's what I think is being missed right now more than anything. But I mean, when you look at what's happened just in the last few weeks since we've talked, you have these relationships that are being brokered by China, bilateral relationships that between countries that are designed to enhance political, economic, military, security, cultural benefits. And that's the thing. I'll give you an example. You have Iraq, and this is all brokered by China, right? So the
Right.
U.S. has the hegemony and the military and the I guess you could call it almost a bullying effect on much of the world, that they must fall in line or be knocked out of the SWIFT system and sanctioned. And if you're on the wrong side of the ledger, where China is coming in and striking deals, building infrastructure, building seaports, railways, bridges, tunnels, oil refineries, gold and silver mines. They're building things in order to mutually benefit each other. They've brokered a deal between Iran and Iraq and are building the first ever railway between the two countries. It's 1,500-kilometer railway from Iran to Iraq, and it could then easily stretch into Syria and Lebanon as part of their southern corridor of the Belt Road Initiative. We've talked a lot about the Belt Road Initiative, Kia, and this is a massive deal that most of the people in this country have no idea what it is. And yet it's the largest infrastructure project in human history, connecting 75, 80% of human population and showing mutual beneficial arrangements, not to mention every one of the OPEC producing countries are on the Belt Road, which is part of my thesis. They recently brokered, now think about this, the United States arguably has fostered this bickering between countries that is centuries old, bickering because it would benefit them to come in and put in a new government and to replace the one that didn't meet the criteria of the West. Well, here, Iran and Saudi Arabia have now sped up diplomatic ties as a deal brokered by China. They are building embassies in each other's countries. These are countries that have been at each other's throats forever, Sunni and Shiite. And yet my enemy's enemy is my friend. This was a peace deal brokered by China, who's the adult in the room at this point, and not the U.S., who's always been the ones to come in and help broker peace deals. Now it's China. And you have other Gulf states who have also cut ties with Iran in the past, such as the United Arab Emirates and Kuwait, who have just, again, through Chinese peace broker deals, restarted relations. And so you have a deal where the countries are moving away from the West, not only in settlement, but also in relationships. And it's like the game of Jenga. I don't know if you ever played Jenga, where it's a tower of bricks or blocks. And each time you pull out a block, it wobbles a little bit more until finally you pull out that one block that makes the whole thing tip. Just like I emailed you this morning, a YouTube snippet to show in Kenya, who just signed a deal with Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates to buy oil with Kenyan shillings instead of US dollars. Another piece of the Jenga puzzle that is coming out. And so when you look at all of these things happening, it's growing by the day.
Before you speak more about Kenya, if you don't mind, I want to show a 2-minute clip, and maybe a little less than 2 minutes, of what the mainstream media is talking about. Is that okay?
Yeah, and did you receive the email I sent you as well on Kenya?
Yes.
The first 20 seconds of it says it all as well, if you want to play that too.
Which one would you like to see first?
Whichever one you'd like. I think they're both important.
Okay, I'll show the one with the mainstream media first, and then I'll bring up the one with Kenya.
Great.
Okay, here we go. Let's see. So family, it's important that you know that mainstream media is actually talking about this perfect storm that's brewing, because now you can see that all the things that Andy Schectman has been talking about is indeed a reality that the world is now, I guess, becoming and being made aware of. So I'm going to let you see this. It's only going to be 2 minutes, family. Make sure you let me know in the chat what you think about this video.
King and Vladimir Putin sending an ominous message to the West during their 3-day summit this week, as new concerns are looking to undermine the U.S. power. Take a look at this. Vladimir Putin announced Russia will be using Chinese yuan for international dollar. Saudi Arabia also in Beijing to do the same thing. Speaking of Saudi Arabia, meanwhile, they are in talks with Iran as well to consider an economic alliance with China and Russia. And they can even be joining the BRIC countries, which is an acronym for these countries here: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. These countries all have emerging economies. So what happens if our economy, the US dollar, are no longer the world's dominant currency? Former Assistant Treasury Secretary and host of the Monica Crowley podcast, Monica Crowley, is here to weigh in. Monica, great to see you this morning. Let's start right there. What happens if these emerging economies move away from the US dollar towards the Chinese yuan?
Well, good morning, Will. It's great to be with you. And it's really hard to overstate exactly how catastrophic the abandonment of the US dollar would be as the world's global reserve currency. Look, since the end of World War II, the dollar has been the safe place to go, and it's been backed up by a couple of things. It originally was backed up by gold, but President Nixon took us off the gold standard, so there's no hard asset backing up the dollar anymore for the last 50 years. But also it's been backed up by the strength and economic power of the United States and the fact that oil has always been traded in dollars. If that were to end, that would mean the end of the US dollar. Look, there's a perfect storm happening right now, Will. The world's reserve currency being that, having that status has been a real privilege, but we've abused the privilege by wholly reckless monetary and fiscal policies over many years, certainly over the last couple of years, which has really.
Yeah, so just thought it was interesting how they mentioned a lot of things you've been talking about, Andy.
Yeah,
Russia,
yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting that they're doing that, Kia. It really is, because this has been something that has been completely ignored by the mainstream for quite some time. And now all of a sudden it's so much in your face that you have to notice it.
Mhm.
And you know, just to encapsulate what she's talked about in a nutshell, since the end of World War II, the dollar has been the world reserve currency. It was originally backed by gold for nations to be able to redeem those dollars that they owned into gold at a fixed rate of $35 an ounce. But the rest of the world, in particular, Charles de Gaulle from France, started to demand gold for the dollars they were holding, realizing that we were abusing the standard by printing more dollars to fund the Vietnam War than we had backing at the Treasury with gold, and they started to drain the treasury of all the gold. And so you had a situation where Nixon closed the gold window, but it was 3 years later that a deal was struck with the Saudi kingdom and by extension OPEC to value oil in dollars globally. And so every country on the planet has had to own dollars since 1974 in order to buy oil, period. And it has given a synthetic demand to the dollar, where if you want to power your country, you better own dollars. And so every country's had to accumulate dollars. And when you see this movement, in particular, the West going green and the oil producing countries all joining a union that represents close to 85 to 90% of human population in mutual beneficial agreements, breaking free from the Western perception of hypocrisy and hegemony, it's a no-lose situation for these countries when they are all joining together. I mean, for goodness sake, we just saw Mexico, our ally to the south, formally apply to the BRICS nations. And when you have Mexico and Saudi Arabia, the linchpin of the dollar hegemony, and Turkey, our ally, who has bought more gold than any country in the world for the past 15 months straight, amongst others, Egypt, and all of these countries that were once really strong allies of the West are now realizing that we have squandered this wonderful opportunity through brain dead monetary and fiscal policy. And they are siding with, I think, the rising power, which will be the BRICS nations. And it pains me to say it, but it's happening. And so much so that the media has to acknowledge it at this point, so far in our face. And, you know, a lot of the things I've talked about have centered around what happens when Saudi Arabia and the rest of the OPEC countries, who are all on the Belt Road, most of which are already applied to or in the BRICS nations, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, all of these entities that comprise the majority of human population that are not going green. What happens when they say, thanks for the memories, we're now going to issue oil in the new Chinese yuan or in Chinese yuan, and there's something called the Petro Yuan bond, which is a bond that has been in existence for a few years now, where countries like Iran can sidestep Western sanctions by selling their oil to China for this Petro Yuan bond, which is immediately convertible like that into gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. And so they can sell their oil for the Petro bond and then convert it into gold and take possession of it. So what happens when China or Saudi Arabia and OPEC say, hey, we're now joining the BRICS. All of our brothers and sisters in the OPEC world are on the Belt Road Initiative. We've decided to now take, just the yuan or ruble or gold or the new BRICS currency they're telling us is coming that will be pegged to commodities, or the Shanghai Cooperation Settlement currency that they have told us will be pegged to gold. Whatever it is, Kia, when that moment happens, it's a religious experience, because the whole world dumps dollars simultaneously, creating a tsunami of inflation that hits our shores, and interest rates spike when that happens.
Excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay.
You mentioned Saudi Arabia, and I think that's very important, because it was actually you, of all the people I've been listening to for years, that explained the importance of Saudi Arabia. And I recall you saying what made the United States dollar the world reserve currency was our agreement with Saudi Arabia. Can you expound on that, Andy?
Right. So, I mean, what basically when we closed the gold window in 71, the dollar was backed by nothing. But the world had been holding dollars since the end of World War II. They were everywhere. And so the deal that we made with them was, hey, you value oil in dollars through OPEC and Saudi Arabia, and we will protect you, and we will provide you military assistance. Well, the day we left Afghanistan, Russia signed a joint military agreement with Saudi Arabia and Nigeria, which at that moment I'm screaming, it's over. We've been protecting the Saudi kingdom for the past 50 years, and that is why we have been the petrodollar. That is the agreement that they agreed to, that they will only value oil globally through OPEC in dollars for that protection. Well, when they're now being protected by other countries and joining other unions that are moving away from the West, that are striking deals that completely sidestep the dollar, it's a very, very big deal. And it's important to understand that when the dollars get dumped globally all at once, and I believe they will, and I want you to show that Kenya slip thing in a second here, interest rates go to the moon to compensate for hyperinflation, and it will happen. There's way more dollars outside the US than there are inside the US, because every country's had to accumulate them. And when that inflation happens and interest rates spike, what makes people feel wealthy in this country collapses. That's stocks and bonds and real estate, which are all inversely correlated to a rise in interest rates. And at the same time, the dollar collapses. It's the perfect storm where all four pillars of wealth get clobbered at once. It's the Klaus Schwab Great Reset. And when you talk about what's happening inside the border, it's bad enough. And this has been the focus, the banks and the stupid policies of giving $115 billion to the Ukraine, but not building a border wall, where children are dying of fentanyl poisoning and people are entering the country illegally by the millions, or bailing out the banks by creating money out of nowhere. But then Janet Yellen telling the world, well, we're not going to bail those banks out, only the ones that we deem are systemically too big to fail. In other words, there's 5,000 small regional banks that are the backdrop of this country. They're the 70% of all of the small businesses in this country invest or bank with these small regional banks that are now basically being told they will not be backstopped. And so in favor of the too big to fail systemically important banks, you're going to see a run on these banks. It is a consolidation of these banks. It is the evisceration of these banks. And what does that mean to the small business? These banks have relationships, and then those relationships have fostered loans Okay, Miss Pruitt, we've known you and your family forever, and you want to start a business, and we like you, and we want you to help build the economy here in our hometown. So let's give you that loan that you need. Well, now you're going to have to go to Bank of America and beg for it, and it's a whole different situation. And we can talk about, if you'd like, after you show this clip,
Okay.
Why the banks are in so much trouble here.
Yes.
But the point of it is that's just part of it. And all of these things that are happening inside the US are only exacerbating the drive to move away from the US outside the border. And these countries, I think, realize this is their one chance. Their one chance to break free of the hegemony of the West and to stand on their own 2 feet, to build a middle class, to build infrastructure, to become more industrialized. And that's what China is doing. When they go into South America, they're not going in there and striking deals just because. They're striking deals and at the same time building up their infrastructure to allow them to achieve what they want to achieve as a country. It's a mutually beneficial deal. That's what business should be. Business should never be just one-sided, or one side feels they won. The best deals I've ever done as a businessman in 33 years are ones that I feel my company came out ahead and the customer came out ahead. That's what business should be. Everyone walks away feeling great and lovey-dovey about each other, knowing that, hey, that company took care of me and I'm where I want to be, and it's great, and I'm going back to them next time. That's what business should be. And that's what China is doing. When they come in there and build the bridges and the roads and the ports and the infrastructure and the oil rigs and the refineries and the ability to move it and to get paid for it and to build what made this country great, the middle class, right? And the middle class now is being eviscerated in this country, and that middle class is moving eastward to countries that are now experiencing real growth and real prosperity, fostered through economic deals of mutual beneficial agreements fostered by China and the BRICS nations. This is what is making it work. And as the West is a bully and sanctions and takes things and drops bombs and doing all of these things. And again, I want you to know that I want everyone to know I'm a patriot. I love this country. My company came from nothing. I mean, my dad's middle name is Miles, and his friend who loaned us $60,000 in 1989 on a wing and a prayer in a one-room office the size of a closet, his middle name was Franklin. And here we are because of this country and the things it has afforded me, where I'm staring at $9 billion in transactions. I mean, and I pinch myself every day that we've got to where we are because of this country. But those foundations, those things that have made this country great are sliding away. And the rest of the world sees it and is seizing this opportunity, this once in a generation opportunity. If you listen to what Xi Jinping said to Putin the other day, he basically said, we are at the forefront of 100-year change. We are now going to direct the change. This is a 100-year change waiting to happen. And he's not wrong, and it is. And if you're on the wrong side of this, you're in big trouble.
Wow, you said a mouthful. It sounds like China is going to be the leader. Actually,
well, not just China, the whole BRICS entity.
Okay.
As an example, the BRICS rotate their presidency. It's in South Africa this year. Now, I keep meaning to find out how long each country holds the presidency, but not any one country will rule the roost. And that's why backing it with commodities, giving everyone equal say, will be what makes it work. And that's the important thing. But China is certainly leading the charge, if you will. Okay. On getting it to this point, but I do believe that this will be a deal where all of the countries involved are using this this union to build a force that is very formidable, not just in terms of its military, but also in terms of its combined GDP. So yeah, I think China certainly is behind it, as is Russia, but the other countries that are joining on realize the value found. And when you see the ability to connect countries like Saudi Arabia and Iran and Iraq, Sunni and Shiite, who have hated each other for years, centuries, in an attempt to break free from the Western suppression, and have deals that will mutually benefit everyone. And who doesn't want to be friends? Okay, let's let bygones be bygones. Let's find a way to make this work. Who wants to live under fear and under strife? People in Iran and Iraq don't. And when you look at what's happened in Iraq, we got devastated the country in search of weapons of mass destruction that were never there, and yet we're not held accountable for that. But I want to raise a point real quick, which is just a side point, right? And I want people to look at the world differently. That's the whole idea here. And I'm not condoning anything, okay? I'm not condoning anything. But I want people to look at this from Putin's point of view, right? So as I mentioned, our ally Mexico just joined the BRICS. They formally applied, right? Now they're a long ways away from being accepted and being in it, but they're the second biggest economy in South America. They're going to want to be part of this, or the BRICS want them part of it, right? Not only for the obvious reasons, but also their geographic location. So what is bothering Russia so much is the encroachment of NATO to their borders. Ukraine's going to apply. They said they would never when they annexed. Same thing with Finland as an example, right? So these countries that are surrounding Russia now want to apply to NATO, and they were promised that they never would and warned, don't do it. Okay, fine, let's have peace. We're cool with that, right? So Mexico formally applies to BRICS. Let's say 5 years from now, they're deep in with BRICS and they're just barely trading with the US. So we're friendly with them, but they're part of the BRICS continent or the BRICS country. Part of what BRICS is, especially the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, is a military organization. Military, business, all sorts of things are built into this charter. Security. What happens if the BRICS nations have military bases throughout the world, just like NATO does, just like the United States do, and you have BRICS military installments right on the Texas-Mexico border on the other side, just like we would have? Can you imagine the outrage in this country if Chinese and Russian military were in Mexico just across the Texas border?
Yeah.
And I want people to understand the encroachment, the feeling of violation. Well, you may not agree with the way Putin is doing things, but look at it from his point of view. And I think that's what the world is seeing. Those people in the West, I mean, they're encroaching on him. They promised they wouldn't, and he's defending his sovereignty. I get that. The exact same way that we would want to do that if these countries were doing. I mean, is it any different than the Cuban Missile Crisis, where they're putting missiles in Cuba? I mean, is it different? I mean, it is, but is it? I mean, it's similar, right? But and I think when you talk about having these countries grow together against the Western sanctions, you look at a country or the European Union countries. They sanctioned Russia as well, and now they just said not only has it been sanctioned, we are confiscating it and using it to rebuild the Ukraine. So now they're taking their assets and their money and stealing it in essence and using it to rebuild the Ukraine. This hypocrisy is what is driving the world away from the dollar. It is the backing of commodities and the mutually beneficial agreements. So much so that countries who hate each other are saying, yeah, let's do this. Let's do this. I'm sorry. It's all good. Let's do this. Because my enemy's enemy is my friend. And the backing of commodities to a system, probably using distributed ledger technology or blockchain, where each country pegs a certain item and a certain amount and must maintain that. And the immutability of it is shown, the veracity on a distributed ledger. Remember, the Chinese digital yuan has been operational for over 4 years. They've done north of 30 billion in transactions. So if you have the ability to show the world the veracity of what is pledged, do it the right way, have it audited, this is their one chance. And I think that's exactly what is happening right now. So, this is bigger than it seems. Maybe you should play just the first 30 seconds of the Kenya deal where, remember, they just made a deal with Saudi Arabia and the UAE, United Arab Emirates, which again was traditionally U.S. ally, both of them, to buy oil with Kenyan shillings ahead of U.S. dollars. Now, one of the things that you can do here is, I don't remember how to do it. There are some buttons that you. Oh, okay. See next to the word save down below there, underneath in the right corner of the picture, there are three
Oh, of
dots.
the picture. Okay, 1 minute. Let me get back to of the picture on on his video.
Yeah, now just to
Yes.
the right, those
Oh, I
three
see the
dots
three
right
buttons.
there.
Yes.
You do transcript because it's a little hard to understand what he says.
Oh, okay. Thank
And
you. I
when
didn't
you
know
do the
that.
show transcript, it will show what he is
Oh,
saying.
that's awesome. Okay.
And he says, if you have dollars, you should go see the nurse, because I didn't understand what he was saying. So go ahead and press play. Watch the first 30 seconds. It'll blow you away. He's saying something's going to happen.
Only the first 30 seconds, Andy?
Yeah, after you'll see what I mean. 30, 45 seconds.
Okay, here we go.
People who work numbers, I am giving you free advice that those of you who are holding dollars, you surely might go into losses. You better do what you must do, because this market is going to be different in a couple of weeks.
There you go.
And secondly, we, through the central bank, we are having conversations.
That's
to
really the only
reinstate
part that you need to
the
hear.
interbank exchange market that has since not worked. And I am happy that the players in that sector, including our banks, are coming forward and they are participating, and they are working with the central bank.
That's really the part that's so important to hear, is that he's saying in the next couple of weeks things are going to be very different. Now I don't know exactly what that means, but I do know that that's ominous to me. Now they just decided to, basically what he's saying is that they're going to dump dollars because they don't. There's been a dollar shortage, so they're always looking for dollars when it comes to selling things and doing things and transactions. Now they said, hey, let's just use Kenyan shillings instead, and both Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have agreed to that.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that he told his citizens, if you hold the United States dollar, stop using them, because it was the same thing that I heard Al-Sudani in Iraq say to his citizens, stop using the dollar. It's
That's
the same
exactly
thing.
right.
The Ghanaian president said the same thing to the Ghanaian citizens. So we see the sentiments of world leaders sharing the same sentiments about the United States dollar. It's worthless, basically.
That's exactly right.
Anything else you want to bring up about what's going on with the dollar or the collapse of the dollar, Andy?
Well, I mean, from the outside, that to me is the most important thing, or things. Those are the things that have changed lately the most anyway. You have these deals where Iran just came out and said that they have no longer any need to use SWIFT with the Russian banks. So they signed, in fact, there was an agreement that was signed recently. 52 Iranian and 106 Russian banks are connected through what is called the Russian Financial Message Transfer System. It's the same thing as SWIFT, except for them. So all of these countries are doing their best to help enhance trade and financial agreements, bypassing the sanctions and the SWIFT financial infrastructure. You have the Chinese who built something called CIPS, the Cross Interbank Payment System. All of these countries are finding ways to sidestep what is the Western linchpin, and that is the SWIFT system. And so, they're striking deals to sell their energy and their commodities, and all of these deals mutually beneficial, but they're also finding ways to transact outside of the SWIFT system. This is all very, very disruptive for the dollar. This is all very, very ominous for the dollar. And, I've felt for a very long time that there will come a moment when they all dump dollars simultaneously. And it'll come on a Sunday night, just like we saw with Silicon Valley Bank. You wake up and it's a whole new reality Monday morning.
Yeah.
That's exactly what will happen here. And there'll be no time to prepare if you haven't.
I remember you saying that on an interview you and I did, that you'll go to sleep. I'm looking for that. You'll go to sleep on a Sunday and wake up on a Monday to a whole new reality. I'll see if I can
It's what
find
it is. It's exactly what it is. Now, I don't know how much you've covered what's going on with the banks here in the US, but I think that's another issue that's very frightening. I mean, I don't know if you saw the interview that Janet Yellen, or there's a 2-minute clip where Janet Yellen was being grilled by the representative from Oklahoma. Have you seen that?
Oh no, I haven't seen that.
This is one that you might want to pull up while I'm talking about
Okay.
it. To me, it's almost treasonous. So, you know, after they bailed out, here's the problem with the banks, first and foremost. For the past decade, interest rates have been at or near zero. So when you deposit your money into the bank, they'd give you 0.25% on your savings account. Well, they would take that money that you would deposit, because the reserve restrictions were eliminated during COVID. So you didn't have to have any reserves if you were a bank, virtually nothing, maybe 1% they would have. I mean, they technically didn't have to have anything, but that 1% reserves means if there is $100 billion in deposits, they would only have to have 1% of that or less on hand in cash to be able to, you know, to pay out. And so anyways, the bottom line is that she, you know, well, first of all, the banks would take that money and buy treasuries, you know, 10-year treasuries that are considered safe, right? And those treasuries are earning at the time, let's say 2%. And if you hold a treasury to maturity, those 10 years, well, you get your money back plus the 2%. They also buy mortgage-backed securities, which are backed by Fannie and Freddie. These are things that were not supposedly risky, but they have longer durations. And the problem is when interest rates go to 5% on the 10-year treasury, if you are forced to sell your treasury before it matures, it's lost 50 or 60% of its value on a coupon that pays 2% versus one that pays 5%. It's lost 60% of its value if you have to sell it. Because why would anyone want to pay you what you paid for that bond if the face value is $1,000 and it pays 2% in 10 years? Why would anyone want to pay you that $1,000 plus the 2% when they can buy the same bond brand new and earn 5% instead of 2%? So the value is cut in half. Anyways, the bottom line is that when these banks are forced to meet redemptions because all of a sudden the depositors come rushing in and say, we want to pull our money out, well, then they're forced to mark those assets to market. Those bonds, which have been eviscerated, are still valued at par or face value on the balance sheet, making the banks look stronger than they are. But if they have to sell those bonds because they have no reserves on hand, because they took all of them and put them into treasuries and mortgage-backed securities, and then they have to sell them prematurely in order to meet redemptions, well, in 24 hours, bang, they go bankrupt, just like we saw, where their assets are 50 cents or more loss on the dollar. So that brings us to what Janet Yellen said to the representative of Oklahoma. And if you Google Janet Yellen, Oklahoma representative, it's
That's what I was looking for. Okay.
And it's outrageous. She basically, here's what happens. He says, Madam Secretary, this is in like a House subcommittee inquiry, and he says, Madam Secretary, so let me ask you this question. You just bailed out Signature Bank and Silicon Valley Bank and their depositors. And this is not the way it was always written up. So I want to ask you a question. If indeed one of my constituents has $5 million in a regional bank, now remember, these regional banks are responsible for 70% of all the small business loans in this country, which has always been roughly 40% of US GDP, the small businesses. And he says, this is it now, she basically says, will you bail out my constituent? Listen to what she says.
Okay. How much do you want me to show that, Andy?
You'll get it right away. It will be a minute and a half or so.
Okay. Let me.
This is like enormous, because what this is going to do is create a massive run on the small banks and push everyone into a handful of banks. So go ahead and press play.
Okay, and I want to do this again when you say show the transcript. Okay, here we go.
Secretary, thanks for being here. There's a lot of things that I wanted to be able to talk about on this. We've got some tax proposals on the table. I have a bipartisan charitable act dealing with tax policy that we're not going to have time to be able to talk through. I'd like to be able to talk about full expensing. Senator Toomey used to be able to champion this, but it's a big issue for our manufacturers in my state and all around the country. Love to get a chance to talk about that. I'd love to talk about marriage penalties in the tax code because, quite frankly, they're still there. It's one of the things we've got to be able to work on. Energy independence. I did notice a whole new set of new taxes on energy companies in the United States that I think would hurt our energy independence. And there's still no definition for the $600 if you do Venmo payments to somebody up to $600. Now the IRS is going to track you. I've noticed that you've delayed that, and the IRS has delayed that. But there's a lot of questions with that and new creative definitions of what it means to be made in America. We now have new treaties that are popping up that are not really treaties, not really free trade agreements, but are being declared free trade agreements to allow from the Inflation Reduction Act actions from Japan and Germany to now be defined as.
Let's not keep going. Keep going. She hasn't got to his question yet.
Okay. I'm sorry. So I'll keep going.
Yep.
Made in America. I find that very creative. Love to talk about all that. Don't have time. I need to be able to drill in on a couple of things. Let me start with some of the banking issues we're dealing with on it. Will the deposits in every community bank in Oklahoma, regardless of their size, be fully insured now? Are they fully recovered? Every bank, every community bank in Oklahoma, regardless of the size of the deposit, will they get the same treatment that SVB just got or Signature Bank just got?
A bank only gets that treatment if a majority of the FDIC board, a supermajority of the Fed board, and I, in consultation with the president, determine that the failure to protect uninsured depositors would create systemic risk and significant economic and financial consequences.
So what is your plan?
We made that determination.
Right. So what is your plan to keep large depositors from moving their funds out of community banks into the big banks? We have seen the mergers of banks over the past decade. I'm concerned you're about to accelerate that by encouraging anyone who has a large deposit in a community bank to say, we're not going to make you whole, but if you go to one of our preferred banks, we will make you whole at that point.
Look, I mean, that's certainly not something that we're encouraging.
That is happening right now.
That is happening because depositors are concerned about the bank failures that have happened and whether or not other banks could also
No,
fail.
it's happening
And
because you're
it's-
fully insured no matter what the amount is. If you're in a big bank, you're not fully insured if you're in a community bank.
Well, you're not.
Was that it, Andy? Or would you like me to keep going?
Yeah, that's it.
It's okay.
Sorry about that. That was UPS at the door. Yes, that's it. And I guess what I want people to understand is here she's saying, well, the banks have to agree. We have to agree. I have to agree. If the bank is too big to be bailed, if the bank is not big enough to be bailed out, they're done. So all of these people, if you have $5 million in a regional bank in middle America because they help you build your business, you're going to leave it there knowing that like that they can go under just like Signature Bank did. There's hundreds of banks right now that are in the same position that Silicon Valley Bank was, and she's just got through telling you that they're not going to be bailed out. Why did those banks get bailed out? And why will others not be bailed out? And this is the crux of the issue. It's going to create a run on the banks. And when that happens and everyone is forced into a handful of small banks, 4, 5, 6 banks, big banks rather, we are now in socialized banking, and we are now in a whole new deal where these small banks, which have literally been the backbone of this country, are gone in a matter of, who knows, a year or two, they'll be gone. And they're forcing a consolidation on the banks. This is a huge deal. Now I want to take it a step further and talk a little bit about something that is supposition and hyperbole, but one of the ladies who I thought would be the Fed treasurer or the Fed secretary, the head of the Fed. Her name was Lael Brainerd, and Lael used to work at the Treasury, and then Lael moved to the Federal Reserve, and I thought that Biden would not reappoint Powell, who was a Trump appointee, and then apply or hire Lael Brainerd. She became second in charge at the Fed, vice chair, as they call it. And then she just left. And she just went to run the head of economics for the president. She's the head of whatever the exact spot is. I'm not exactly sure, but it's the head of Economic Advisory Committee for Biden. Now, her whole thesis when she ran for Fed chair was modern monetary theory and abolishment of the commercial banks and have money given directly to the public from the central bank. So the first step would be, if you wanted that to happen, would be get rid of the 5,000 regional banks and push everyone into a handful of large commercial banks. And that's what's happening right now. You're not going to backstop the regional banks, but you will the too big to fail banks. If you have your life savings, or you own a small trucking business, or you're a farmer, or whatever it is, are you going to leave your money in a bank that will not be bailed out, where $250,000 is the max you're going to get paid? And keeping in mind that FDIC insurance, all of it only comprises 0.03% of all of the deposits, where there's $125 billion in FDIC funding backing $9 trillion in deposits. Not going to happen. And so you're going to pull your money out and yank it and buy gold and silver, or yank it and go buy or put your money into Wells Fargo or Bank of America or JP Morgan, and those small banks will collapse. And now, if you want to initiate a central bank digital currency, you have everyone in a handful of commercial banks. Either you do it right through those banks, or you just let those banks flow up to. And now everyone is freaking out looking for a solution, and in comes the white knight on a CBDC horse. And it is a little bit of supposition, but what I am simply saying is that if you want to implement a central bank digital currency and get people using it, put them all into 4 or 5 banks, and it will be a whole hell of a lot easier than everyone scattered throughout the country in 5,000 regional banks.
People wonder if their credit unions are safe, Andy.
They're not any more safe in a credit union than they are in a bank. I mean, they all have the same problems. The problem is that these credit unions, they were taking the deposits and buying treasuries with them, and things that, because when they were only paying their depositors a few percent, and you have to, when you deposit money in a bank, Kia, that money is an asset of you, it is a liability of the bank, and they have to offset that liability with an asset, and they do that typically with a bond, mortgage-backed security, or a treasury. And who would have ever thunk that a treasury would be toxic? But when you're buying it at 2% and rates go to 5%, it is toxic if you have to sell it. And so even the credit unions, they're loaded up with things like treasuries and whatnot. And so while they may be safer than a regional bank and maybe more well capitalized, I would argue that they're no better off in reality than the rest of them. And if push comes to shove, they'll get hammered just like the rest of them.
Well, thank you for asking that question. That leads me to the next question, and that is, we know that if you have $250,000 in the bank, it's insured. What if you have less than that? Should you be concerned, especially since people are making bank runs right now? If you have less than $250,000 in the bank, are you safe?
Yes, technically you are.
Okay.
But remember, FDIC woefully undercapitalized. So, I mean, they'll just print money to give it to you, which is hyperinflationary ultimately. But yes, you are safe if you have under 250,000, the way the laws are written now. If you have over that amount in a bank, you're out of your mind.
Okay. Okay. Somebody, do you have time for a few questions, Andy?
I do. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Frank says he wants to know what the difference is between the CCP and the People's Republic of China. He thinks everybody should know that there is a difference, and he would like for you to address that.
Well, I'm not exactly sure. I know that the People's Republic of China is, I guess they'd call that, I don't know, that's the largest country in the world with over 1.3 billion people. I think the CCP is the communist branch, if I'm not mistaken. I believe that's what it is, the communist branch of China, or the Communist Party of China. So I think it's a little bit different. I think it would be the Communist Party versus the country itself. Now, I could be wrong. I'm sorry. I'm not the expert on that, but that is the way that I would answer it. I hope I'm right.
Yes, and I actually did a video about it, I think in the summer, about how millions of people actually defected from the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. And so they were dancing and celebrating in the streets. And that celebration was actually led by a Chinese businessman here, a Chinese American businessman here. And I think he said it was like 400 million people defected from the CCP. So that's good news.
Yeah, but the CCP still controls the game, and the PBOC, the bank. They do control the game. They're still a communist country, but I don't know how that plays out in the end. Look, I think the bottom line is simply this: that they are going to be the driving force of what's coming next, and whether or not communism wins out over capitalism or something different than a communist country, I guess we'll have to see. Certainly, it appears as though that they will have the majority of the world's prosperity, I think, will move in that direction. And I guess we'll have to see how that plays out. But what they are doing right now is anything but communist, in the respect that they are forging these bilateral agreements. They are forging mutual beneficial agreements, and they are doing things in a very capitalistic way, where we'll come in and we'll build your infrastructure, and we will get you to where you need to be, and we'll share profits, and this will help both of us. So that to me is capitalism, but being ushered in from a communist regime. I guess we'll see how it all plays out.
Yes. I wanted to show you something, Andy, because what I did was I Googled what happens if the United States dollar loses the world's reserve currency status. And I just thought it was interesting that they actually were talking about it. This was September 19, 2022 is when this article was published. And it just talks about, how we have currency status here. And before I get to my main point, can you explain what it means for the United States to have financial hegemony?
Well, it just means that every country on the planet has to own dollars in order to buy oil. We are the world reserve currency as a result of the petrodollar, and as a result of having the plumbing, if you will. We are the most advanced economy in the world, and so the hegemony centers around not only the fact that everyone owns dollars, but that just about everything is valued in dollars. Every commodity is valued in dollars, and so when countries want to buy things, most of it has to first be converted into dollars, or most of the debts that these countries have around the world are valued in dollars, so they need to accumulate dollars in order to service the debt. It just means that the dollar is the preferred currency of the world for now, is basically what that means.
And hegemony, what means we have control or leadership?
Yes, exactly. We're the top of the heap. Exactly.
Okay. So here, thank you, Andy. Here in this article, it asks the question, what happens if we lose the world reserve currency status? And I just thought it was interesting I'll just read a little bit about this. It says, the first thing you want to do is cover your financial assets. Investments and anything tied to the stock market are tied to the United States dollar. And I want to bring up the point that for those who say I'm not invested in stocks, if you have a retirement account or retirement, what do you call it, investment, those are typically tied to stocks. Is that correct, Andy?
Or bonds,
Or
yes.
bonds? Okay.
Absolutely.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, absolutely. Stocks and bonds are the typical vehicles within a typical retirement account.
Okay. Your stock portfolio and 401ks are all in fiat currency. The minute the United States dollar loses its value, your portfolio, according to this article, will tank. The best way to preserve your wealth is to convert your portfolio and any excess liquid assets into physical gold and silver. I thought, wow, they're actually just coming out and saying it. That owning physical gold and silver is the only way to protect your purchasing power if the dollar does bottom out. So then it goes on to say, unfortunately, investing in commodities is not enough to save your wealth, as it is tied to the stock market and therefore the dollar. Outside investing in gold and silver, find ways to protect your home. So, Andy, I just wanted to bring out that they actually said that one of the ways to protect yourself is to have silver and gold. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, silver and gold are not an investment to me, Kia. They're wealth. And I think in the environment we are heading into, he or she who loses least wins, because everyone's going to lose in this environment. This is a once in 100-year shift, just as Xi Jinping told Putin. It is. It is a move away from the dollar hegemony, and it is a move away from the dollar being the sole settlement currency of the world. And if you look at the fact that it is the relationship with Saudi Arabia, which has deteriorated considerably, that has given us this petro status, you know, the rest of the countries that the BRICS nations and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the Eurasian Economic Union and the Belt Road Initiative, this is the majority of human population that are not going green. And if you look at the deals that China is doing, they're going into oil producing countries like South America and Africa, and building refineries and building more rigs and building bridges and railways and ports to get it out of the country and to industrialize and to enrich the middle class and to build prosperity for countries that have been, you know, third world nations forever. So this is exactly the pathway that they are taking, and this is why it is working, and this is why countries are signing up for it. The same thing is happening in Mexico. China is doing deals in Mexico to build their infrastructure, and it's a good deal. It's a good deal for both countries, and China is smart. They're securing, you know, they think in terms of decades. We think in terms of days, and they're securing their future for decades to come, centuries to come. This is a sad situation where our children will not have the same opportunities that we've had if this continues much longer. And quite frankly, when you realize that we're 150 trillion in debt, I don't know how we get out of this problem. Mm-hmm. You know, we talk about a $31 trillion debt. That excludes the 76 trillion underfunding in Social Security and the mountain of debt in Medicare and Medicaid and government and military pensions that exceed $130 trillion in and of themselves. Mm-hmm. So this is one of those deals where I just think that it's just beginning. And when this hegemony is lost, when these unions are accentuated, it becomes something that will change everyone's life immeasurably forever. And that's when you see dollars get dumped, interest rates spike, and like that article said, those assets are inversely correlated to a spike in interest rates. So, you know, that's the bottom line, is that she's right. When this happens, it becomes a very, very scary thing, because assets immediately collapse as interest rates go to the moon.
Yes. One of my favorite scriptures in the Bible is that a wise man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. So I love the way you equate silver and gold to wealth, because this is something that you can pass down to your future generations or your posterity.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. And that's what it is. It's a legacy. It is a legacy that is being built between, between one generation to the next. And when you buy gold and silver, you're buying wealth and you hope you never need to use it. And if you do, you're damn glad you have it. And it's not just for an emergency, it could be a heck of an opportunity. And then at that point, if you don't need it, there is nothing better that you can leave to your kids that have outlived 2 world wars and German hyperinflation and the Great Depression and every pandemic and everything, frankly, the world has thrown at it. And it is the only asset that is being accumulated by every government around the world.
Thank you, Andy. And here's one final question. Do you and your company offer rolling over their 401ks into gold and silver?
We do. The first thing you would do in my, I work with all the custodians that do this, Kia. The one that I like the best is New Direction Trust Company in Louisville, Colorado. Their website is N as in new, D as in direction, T as in trust, CO as in company, ndtco.com. You roll over your existing plan into an IRA that allows you to buy anything, also precious metals, physical precious metals. And the coolest part about the IRA that has precious metals within it is the ability to take possession if you ever want to. Now, that would be considered a taxable event, right? So it is a taxable event, but the ability to withdraw it and take possession of it, to me, is exactly what makes the precious metals IRA so sought after and such a cool product. So yes, once you move that over, then you contact us and we'll make sure that your listeners get the best price in America. I was presented, by the way, with our new website last night, and it's incredible. It's done. It is done. There's just one last piece that they're doing. They are integrating the credit card software and they're integrating the tax software.
Okay.
There's still a handful of states that are dumb as a mud wall that tax precious metals, and although many of them have deals right now in front of their state legislature to remove it. So we're getting really close, and I appreciate everyone's patience that will allow people to purchase online. But in the meantime, anyone who's interested in things like a precious metals IRA or a current price sheet or any questions, send us an email at info@milesfranklin. One of these days, we'll tell you to go right to our new website. Not yet, but almost. But info@milesfranklin. Request information on IRAs or on current price sheet. We will not be undersold. Our prices will be as good or better than anyone in North America. And just mention Dr. Kia Pruitt sent me in the subject line, and we'll make sure not only that they get the best service, the best pricing, but we'll give it extra special care since they came from you.
Thank you so much, Andy. I'm so honored to always have you here and to do business with you. Thank you for allowing me to be an affiliate with your company. People have had great experiences. They always call me and let me know. So thank you to you and all your brokers. I do have a broker with Andy. His name is Justin. He's wonderful. He answers my questions. Oh, and I want to say, if you all are concerned, because you can have these, they're mailed out. The precious metals are mailed straight directly to your door. So you don't have to worry about that. And it's in an unidentified box. It does not say Miles Franklin on it. But you can also, and correct me, Andy, or add to this, have it delivered to a nearby UPS.
To a hub, to a UPS hub, not a store, but a hub.
Okay.
I mean, we could do it to a store, but stores are the UPS stores are franchises, and when you deliver it there, the insurance is gone, and you have, and don't take this the wrong way, but you might have a high school kid working after school there behind the counter. Now, I'm not disparaging anyone or anything. I'm just saying the security there is not the same way that it would be if it was delivered to a hub, a customer service center, where the trucks pull in and out, and it's kept in a secure location. So if you go there and say, hey, here's my package, my receipt that I need to pick up a package, and my name's Dr. Kia Pruitt, it's not going to be behind the counter of a UPS store in a strip mall. It's going to be in the back in a secure area at a hub. And that's where I would encourage people to do it if that's the route they wanted to go. So all you would need to do is look up, let's say you live in Louisville, Kentucky. You would look up UPS hub Louisville, Kentucky, and a bunch will pop up, and it's a customer service center or a hub. It's where the trucks park at night. That place, and that's where you would go and give us that address, and we can certainly have it delivered there for you. Yes.
Thank you. I'm so fortunate because Justin, my broker with you, helped me with that. So
Justin was my personal assistant for the last 3 years. I've known him since he was a young kid, and his dad is one of my best friends. Much like all of our employees, our brokers. I noticed someone mentioned David. David's one of my oldest friends since junior high. Every one of my brokers, every one of them, are personal friends that most go back to Little League and elementary school. Some go to high school and college, and some a little more recently, but I would consider every single one of them amongst my very dearest and best friends outside of work. And the reason I hired them all is, everyone says don't work with friends and family. I disagree with that. I think if you are close enough with these people and they understand what it means to be a team, a family, then it's just been amazing. These people all treat my company as if it were their own, and in many respects it is. And so that's why I work with my best friends and my family. My sister, my father, and I started the company, and 14 of my oldest friends that run my company and are my brokers, and you will be treated differently from any place you ever call. So that I can assure you. Justin, who was my assistant and now is his own broker, knows more about the inner workings of my company than I do, because he did everything. And stuff that I took for granted, he knows how to do that I don't. And that's what I love about it. And his father is one of my oldest friends. So this type of closeness and relationship is very family-like. You always start your videos up by saying, hello, family. Well, that's how I feel about my team. And I truly do mean that. And so given the opportunity to work with your people, not only have we never had a customer complaint, not only are we licensed and bonded, one of the only licensed and bonded companies in the entire United States because of the Minnesota accreditation, we have an A+ rating. We're US Mint authorized resellers. We will not be undersold. And we want to treat your people the way they deserve to be treated, Tia. So it's just as much of an honor for us to work with you as you say it is to work with us. And I thank you for that very much.
Thank you, Andy. You've been so generous with your time. I thank you so much for your wisdom, for your prophetic words, for your knowledge, and for your service. Thank you so much. You're amazing, and so is your team. We appreciate you.
And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and everyone out there, and I'll look forward to catching up with you next week.
All right. Well, family, thank you so much for joining us today. We are so grateful that you came here and that you allow us to be part of your soul family. I trust that we said something to raise your vibrations and to inspire you to create the most amazing, magnificent reality that you desire and deserve. Peace, family. Make this a great day. Bye-bye. Bye, Andy.
Bye.
Thank you.